Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Rachel Rubel. Obtaining Turkish citizenship by investing has just become a lot more attractive. The lira's slide over the past several months may have a silver lining, boosting foreign investment. The government recently lowered the requirements for offshore buyers. It's opened the doors for high-earning businessmen to not only open up shop here, but also streamlined the path to becoming a Turkish citizen. Adel Halim crunches the numbers with this report.
As the picturesque Bosphorus Strait flows through the heart of Istanbul, the dream of owning a property along the body of water separating Europe and Asia may soon become a reality for many foreign buyers, thanks to the weakened lira.
Having a seaside mansion on the Bosphorus is prestigious for business people, and Middle Eastern people would like one because we share similar culture, similar food, and they feel like they're home when they're here.
Now, Turkey is looking to lure even more investors with the promise of citizenship. To do so, the country has slashed the requirements first introduced in January 2017. There are a half dozen ways to get Turkish citizenship, from depositing at least $500,000 in a Turkish bank, down from $3 million, to creating at least 50 jobs, down from 100. But by far, the option that has generated the most interest is investing a minimum of $250,000 in the Turkish real estate market, reduced from $1 million. Estate agents say they've seen the effect the currency crisis has had on the housing market firsthand.
Many businessmen affected by the economic crisis may be selling their mansions out of necessity, and those who have the money may be using this opportunity to buy below market value.
Turkey's real estate sector, which had seen a softening in demand, welcomes the lowered investment thresholds. Turkey's investment office helps foreign investors enter the domestic marketplace. Fatih Altunyuva says the new rules are a win-win situation.
By win-win, I mean those are actually good business decisions, actually. Real estate business is a very important business in Turkey. It's a main part of our economy, and mainly it brings also high revenues. And that way they get a good business and they also get the Turkish citizenship.
Since the original investment for citizenship rules were introduced, Altunyuva says there have been 90 applicants, 40 of which have been processed and granted citizenship. So far, the majority of applications have come from Gulf countries.
We expect now a higher interest because now we have a different option besides citizenship to the countries or to the people who are not willing to get citizenship. We gave also the opportunity for a long-term resident permit, which was also a question actually from some countries in the region.
As there are political tensions in the region, accepting Turkish citizenship may not be in the best interest of a foreign investor. For example, Turkey's ally, Qatar, is not in the top 10 of foreign investors, but Saudi Arabia is.
On the economic side, we see that between the nations and between the people, it's a bit different. As you know, politics is something else, economy is something else, and the human relations are also something else.
Whether a multi-million-dollar home along the Bosphorus or a more modest flat elsewhere in the country, the message is clear. Turkey is open to investors, passport included. Adel Halim, Straight Talk, Istanbul.
Joining me now is Taha Arvis, a journalist at Daily Sabah, and Hamed Ilhamian, who is the Director of International Sales at Anka Invest. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Taha, let me start with you.
Okay.
So why is Turkey loosening the rules on foreign investment? So what's the goal here?
I think there are two goals. I mean, the primary goal, I think, would be to attract investment, obviously. Many other countries have similar programs going on. So Turkey is doing two things. I think not only does it want to attract investment, but it also wants to attract investors, because not only is there a lack of investment currently in Turkey, but there's also a lack of human resources in many fields. So I think they want to make it easier for people to come to Turkey and live here, as Turkish citizens, and integrate with the society and contribute to the economy.
And Hamid, what countries are foreigners coming from to buy property here in Turkey?
Mostly in Turkey, the foreigners who are coming to invest in Turkey, they're from the Gulf countries, especially from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Dubai. You know, we see many people from the south of the Gulf, like Iran, from Iraq. These are the mostly people who are already investing in Turkey, especially in Istanbul.
What are the reasons that foreigners would want to invest in property in Turkey right now?
The first thing at the moment is the capital appreciation. You know, with the exchange rate of dollar, okay, it gives the people a better purchasing power, okay. So the amount of the people who are already putting money in Turkey now is approximately around $150,000 to $200,000, and this was before very difficult for them to bring this amount of money. But now with the exchange rate, it's very easier for them to buy bigger properties, okay, in better locations, okay, before they have to go to some certain areas in the west of Istanbul where the property is cheap. But now they can come more towards the downtown. You know, they can buy bigger properties, more central locations. They can even purchase commercial properties, which it brings higher rental income.
Taha, are there any mechanisms in place to control people who might come here for nefarious purposes, you know, criminals or perhaps money laundering? Because now that they've loosened the requirements, it certainly opens the opportunity up for a lot more people.
Sure. I mean, that's always a concern with these type of programs, but there are a lot of countries in the world that have similar problems. And London is a center for not only foreign investment, but also for money laundering, frankly. I mean, we've heard all the scandals that HSBC has been involved in other banks, frankly, many other banks. So these are problems that Turkey will face as more investors come to the country. But I think the government they have very strict abilities to track such things. I mean, there was a recent case where people were laundering hundreds of millions of dollars in very small increments. So I think the technology is so advanced now that it's not as difficult to track those things.
How much is Turkey expecting to see interest from foreign buyers increase with this new program?
You know, I think this program has come at a time maybe a little later than it should have come, only because there's currently an emerging market slowdown, a slump. So there is not as much money, frankly, as there was before in the world. I mean, 10 years ago, you had very few options as far as where you could park your money. You know, you would get less than 0.5% interest on your U.S. Treasury bonds. And so people were looking for investments in emerging markets for return on equity. Whatever that may be, it was practically zero a decade ago. So now people are investing. So Turkey now has competition. But I think the one thing that many people who live in Istanbul will tell you is that Turkey is, unlike many other places, a livable country, very much a livable country. I mean, whatever happens to the economy, you know, it's a beautiful country. I mean, the name of this program, Strait Talk, refers to these beautiful straits that Istanbul has. Unlike other countries, I mean, if you live in the Gulf, for example, I mean, Abu Dhabi is great, you know, Dubai is great, Qatar is great, but when the summer comes, the locals are gone, you know? I mean, it's just unlivable practically in the summer. And that doesn't really exist in Istanbul for any period of time. The winters aren't that bad. You know, the summers aren't that, in general, for all of Turkey. So in that respect, I think Turkey is expecting to get a lot of traction here, a lot of interest, but not as much as it could have probably in the years past.
Hamid, what about driving up the market price for locals? We've seen in other cities around the world where foreign investment comes in and they pay over market value for properties, and then locals can't afford to buy homes. And especially with the drop in the lira recently here in Turkey, is there concern about that at all?
It is. You know, to be honest, with the lira going down, okay, it makes it good for the foreign investors to come and purchase properties. But in the same time, you know, it's the prices are increasing. The prices are increasing, but there is a different way of looking at this, okay? Because when the people are coming, the market value goes higher. The real estate are getting more expensive, but at the same time, the quality of the investments, you know, is getting better, okay? Many foreigners, they come here with the small amount of money, $100,000, $150,000, okay, but they can buy a good property. But a Turkish person will never pay this amount of money because they are getting loans from the bank. Okay, these loans they can pay it with less than 0.98%, which was announced by the government. So it's less than 1%, and they can pay it up in 10 years. But a foreigner, when it comes here, he's bringing cash. So this will speed up the markets. Okay, so I see it as a good thing.
What sort of reassurances will investors have that their investments here in Turkey will be protected? I mean, as we know, rules change all the time, but foreigners who come in who may not be familiar with a lot of the rules of Turkey, I mean, are there certain reassurances in place for them?
The first thing was, when Turkey announced to give the title deeds, full ownership to the foreigners in 2012. Okay, the first insurance they give to the foreigners is that you're gonna own this property 100%, and it is inheritable. So that's the most, that's the best insurance you can get from one country.
Taha, are there any politics in place here, politics of the region? Is that reflected at all in foreign investment in Turkey?
I mean, I think politics plays an important role in real estate, especially in Turkey in these days, because many of the countries that that we're talking about that were investing in Turkey have turmoil of their own. They have a lot of questions unanswered about their regional politics. So Turkey has been relatively very stable in the last 15, 20 years. And unlike the other, I mean, we talk about some of the countries we're talking about, Saudi Arabia, they have a very elderly monarch who may pass away at any point, and then who will inherit the throne. That exists for all the Gulf countries, frankly. The neighbors to the south, Syria, Iran, Iraq, these are not exactly the most stable countries. So many of these people who live in these areas are investing in Turkey because Turkey has stability. Despite economic crises that may occur globally nowadays, politically it's a stable country. It's a very old, society. Let's put it that way. I mean, we live right now. We're 3 miles away from the third oldest golf course in the entire world because, a Scottish guy came here 100 years ago, and so it's not a new country. Many of these Gulf countries have just recently become independent from their colonial powers. So I think these investors are coming here because they're in it for the long term. Turkey doesn't have a lot of political instability anymore.
All right, Hamid Elhamian and Taha Arvis, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
For Turkish men, turning 20 is a coming-of-age moment as the countdown to their mandatory military service begins. But with a changing society following the end of the Cold War nearly 30 years ago, many have questioned if Turkey's conscription system is outdated. In recent years, more Turks have applied for exemption from the military in return for a fee. And the government has hinted that it could widen this exemption policy as it looks to build a more nimble and professional fighting force, as John Hasasu explains.
A disciplined soldier and a fearless spy for the Ottoman Sultan Abdülhamid. Söğütlü Osman is one of the main characters in a popular TV series in Turkey. But in the real world, the 28-year-old Yusuf Aytekin was in two minds about whether he should advance his acting career or do his mandatory military service.
Dizide, tiyatroda aslında hep böyle bir yolumuz kesişti.
In theatre and on TV, I always played the role of the soldier. In Turkish society, the soldier has a special place. It's a sacred role model. I was doing my master's degree at university, and now that the government has passed the military exemption bill, I will be applying for it.
Çok farklı bir yeri vardır.
Military service is compulsory for every male over the age of 20 in Turkey. And while they can postpone their duty if they are going to university, it isn't something they can avoid altogether. Aytekin believes the Turkish army will be stronger with experienced professional soldiers who can offer long-term services.
Profesyonel olarak görevimi ben burada yerine getiriyorum.
As an actor, I'm doing a professional job and I'm a ring in the chain of production. In the absence of a ring, the whole chain will unravel. I see the professional army in the same light.
The government recently announced it will exempt those who paid 15,000 Turkish liras, which is around 2,400 US dollars, from military service. And so far, a record 515,000 men have applied. Critics say this contradicts Turkey's patriotic spirit. But Gültekin Yıldız, who is the director of the strategic studies at the National Defense University, says it's not a question of patriotism, but one of expertise.
People in Turkey are still nationalists, are still willing to serve their country, but not in peace times. They want to be a part of national will when there is a real state of emergency. There is a real military threat or attack against the country.
The Ottoman army began drafting young men around the same time as Europe, just after the French Revolution. It has also been the main recruitment source for the Turkish military. Turkish conscripts have since participated in UN and NATO operations such as the Korean War, Kosovo, and Afghanistan. But Yıldız says the needs of the Turkish military in both regional and global terms have now changed.
After the Cold War, the need for Turkish armed forces is now a small-sized but mobile, well-trained, well-equipped army staff, much more professional and volunteer, who is willing and able to use the new defense systems and high-tech weapons.
After clearing Daesh and the YPG from the Syrian side of its border, the Turkish army set up posts inside Syria. In Iraq, Turkish commandos are conducting raids against the PKK, and all the soldiers involved in these operations are professional volunteers. This year, Turkey is set to exempt around 500,000 of its youth from the military, and it's expected to use that money for developing smaller but more efficient units. Can Hasasu, Strait Talk.
And joining me now, Onur Aram, who is a political analyst, and Mesut Uyar, who is a military historian at Antalya Bilim University. Thank you both for joining me today. Onur, we've seen a rise in applications to be exempted from military service. A record 515,000 men have applied to pay this fee, which amounts to about 2,400 US dollars. Why are we seeing this rise in exemption applications?
It is probably a collection of things. When the first, this procedure started was for Turkish diaspora living outside of Turkey. I am actually one of those former members who has, used this right to do his military service. I did it for, back then it was 28 days. And then after that, it was opened later on to Turkish citizens living in Turkey. Mostly it was for people that were not drafted, but it was elder in their years. So to kind of give it a quick fix to a problem, they did it, and they did it time after the Turkish military did it time after time, along with the government. But right now, I think there's a collection of things going on. Number one, there was a need because there was a lot of apparently there was a lot of people that were over the age of 20 or much older, who was needing and not being able to go to military for a number of different reasons. That was number one. Number two, there is a dynamic change that's taking place in the Turkish military. As opposed to couple of decades ago, we now need fewer soldiers on the field, but with more sophisticated arms. Well, Turkey had been relying on foreign technologies to keep up its military stand. But in the last 10 years, as we're seeing the fruits of it right now, Turkey has been developing its own technology, not depending on in any of its allies or non-allies for this technology. So Turkey has been needing less and less foot on the ground.
Turkey has a long history of military participation, but do you see this as a changing society, or the military's changing role in society?
This is also something related with the global developments. As we know, universal conscription started with the French Revolution, and it started not because of military needs, but because of political needs. Revolutionary France needed citizen soldiers, not professional army. So we need to combine this issue. It looks as if conscription looks as if a military phenomena, but it has also social, political, economic connections. So when you change the system, you need to pay attention what the other countries are doing. For example, America, Britain, France, Germany. There's a general trend of professionalizing the armies. But at the same time, we are receiving mixed news from other countries like Sweden reintroducing the conscription again. It will start next year. So we need to pay attention not only the military dynamics, but also social, economic, and other dynamics.
So if Turkey's military moves more toward the professional military, doesn't that mean a leaner but stronger military?
So in case of a big war, what will you do? That means you need to create a reserve system. Currently, America, Britain have either army reserve or territorial army to compensate a need of sudden influx of numbers. Additionally, are we ready to get rid of some of the benefits that the conscript army providing? Because up to now, Turkish army has been a school of nation. That means giving basic education to poor educational background soldiers, generally peasant boys, providing some skills from driving to providing some new skills that can be useful for civilian life. Are we ready to get rid of these kind of things? And additionally, when you transform into a professional army, that means you will get rid of a large body of army recruitment centers all over the country. And when you need to reintroduce conscription, that means you need to rebuild this big system once again. I mean, there are pros and cons for this. There's a kind of a global context going on, but we are receiving also some mixed news from different countries.
Okay, Onur, I want to ask you, these 515,000 or so men who've applied for exemptions, if they are approved, will they be spending more time in school? Will they be going into careers that they wouldn't normally be able to start because they'd be performing military service?
Well, to say the least, they will be, there's going to be 500,000 more available, probably educated and probably skilled workers out there producing, producing income for the economy. Because once you're in the military, once you're doing your service, your only source that you're creating is one in the military. You're not, giving any economical direct value into the economy itself. So we're probably gaining 500,000 more people in the next, traditionally next 12 to 16 months. For them to be more in the economy, hopefully, giving back to economy or producing or, creating income. Totally.
And Masoud, do you think conscription is an outdated system, or do you think there's still a need for it?
If we come across World War II style, big armies fighting against each other, that means you need conscription. So if you are planning to get rid of conscription, that means somehow we need to create an army reserve system, a military reserve system, in case of a probability to increase the number of our army. Additionally, conscript armies provides lots of benefits. For example, thanks to conscription, civilian doctors serve period of time in the military. That means military generally do not need to hire more doctors, or thanks to conscript, we have necessary tailors, barbers, drivers, plumbers. When you get rid of conscription, that means you need to hire more people to perform mundane, not military-related jobs. So creating a professional army does not mean that you don't need these mundane jobs to keep the army self-sufficient. At the same time, when you enter into the job market, because professional army means you will compete with private companies and other state institutions to get the best out of the available people from the pool. That means you need to offer better salaries, you need to offer extra advantages like America or Britain, so as to convince people that selecting military job would be beneficial for them.
All right, thank you so much, Masoud Uyar and Onur Aram. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks.
That's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Rachel Rubel. If you have any comments or suggestions, do share them with us on Twitter with #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.